Now, I'm here talking a little bit about insurance requirements, but also about small to medium enterprise investment. So a bit of my session is really targeted at the buyers in the room, but also we're going to talk a little bit about QBuild and some of the opportunities available through QBuild. And I think some of my QBuild colleagues are going to come up and join me, and I will make sure that I give you plenty of time because you're the more interesting part of this. So when I say this is targeted at our government buyers, I acknowledge the fact that we in procurement, we tend to be pretty conservative folk. We want to make sure that we get the best value for money, and we are risk averse, and that's a good thing. We don't want to go crazy and whimsical with the government's money. We want to make sure that we're getting value. But sometimes we can be, we err a little bit on the side of being risk averse, and I guess this comes a bit with insurance requirements. What's really important is that we align the risk profile of procurement and that that's informed by commercial market insurance considerations. And so we've developed a lot of material over the years to help buyers make those assessments. And I really, again, direct you to the Queensland Government Procurement website that provides a lot of that guidance material. It will walk you through how to do that risk assessment. There are so many forms of insurance, and if you're new to this area, it can be a little bit daunting. But making sure, again, that it's that alignment, that you've got the best fit, because if we don't do that, we are ruling out a whole range of suppliers who may be able to provide those services in a very fit and proper way. So it's always about aligning and getting that right fit. The risk assessment process will allow you to do that. It will make sure that we avoid excessive insurance, but it also makes sure that we avoid inadequate insurance, and that we just, as I said, we always just need to keep getting that right fit. We've talked about the risk assessment. So looking at that risk assessment, identifying the procurement that's there, identifying insurable risks from events or incidents that could cause harm to someone, harm to damage or to property, or indeed financial loss. Determining then what's the appropriate cover. If you've done that assessment, what's going to work best to cover people. You've got that, again, looking at the insurable risks and goods or services supplied, as well as the insurance period. Looking then at the minimum level of insurance cover required, determining the level of exposure. Through that risk assessment, you'll have determined the level of exposure, and then being clear that that level of exposure determines the minimum level, and that then we're getting a better assessment of what's actually required, and we can communicate that very clearly to suppliers, because of course that's the next thing, making sure that we're very upfront in the documents about the insurance requirements. You don't want people going to all the effort of putting in a tender, and it is a lot of effort, with not knowing that they do need these specific requirements. And there are some services that do require quite heavy requirements. So things like salary packaging for government payroll, because of the huge amount of dollars going through those arrangements, it requires quite a hefty assurance and insurance process. Better to know that up front. Reviewing the terms and conditions, specifying insurance requirements, monitoring and reviewing to ensure the insurance is maintained and adequate. And we need to look at that on a fairly regular basis. It's not really a set and forget type of thing. So really important to do that. It all just sounds such common sense, but it's one of the key pieces of feedback we have from suppliers about how insurance requirements that are too high can cut out suppliers from the market. So a really important piece. Now, small and medium enterprise procurement is something we're very keen on. The government has set a 25% target for small to medium enterprises in government, and there are a range of things that we're doing in that process to help. I might actually invite Sandra, if you want to come up, and so that we can talk very seamlessly after I move through this. We're very keen to ensure that we have small to medium enterprises well involved. There are things that buyers can do. So establishing thresholds so that up to $250,000, we invite at least one Queensland small and enterprise to be invited to quote or tender. There are things like market development strategies, helping develop a market in particular areas to encourage suppliers to enter. And one of the things I think I talked about in the early presentation was that notion of, can we take big contracts and unbundle them and bring them into chunk-sized pieces so that small to medium enterprises have a better chance of doing that work. Now, we've been successful. I think we're at something like 28% of the value of spend across the Queensland Government goes to small and medium enterprises, but we're keen to continue that and work up to 30% in 2022. And we have a range of guidance to assist that. People in category councils and in their agency procurement plans are looking at very tangible strategies to make that happen. But I might stop now and hand over to my colleagues from QBuild.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm Sandra Burke, Executive Director in QBuild, and this is Josh Seabrook, who's our panel manager for SEQ. So, as Sharon said, SME involvement in Queensland Government, and particularly in delivering services for Queensland, is so vitally important. And particularly in QBuild. QBuild in its own delivers approximately over $1.2 billion worth of works for government agencies in the building environment on construction and maintenance works. And we are very much dedicated to SME involvement. To the tune, I think in terms of the registered suppliers, I think over 700 registered suppliers and contractors currently on our books in QBuild, and certainly we're exceeding that threshold around mandating the percentage that the government has set on SME involvement. We are statewide, so we're not just SEQ, we are all across the state, from Torres Strait right down to the border and far west Queensland. We have regional offices where we have dedicated procurement teams supporting the delivery sections of QBuild. So we are very much localised and decentralised when it comes to attending to the local needs of businesses, and we've got a very strong contingent, obviously, in SEQ. QBuild delivered the services for Queensland Government in the areas of public housing, education, TAFE, correctional facilities, hospitals, so a very broad range of works and services for Queensland Government, and we partner with state agencies. Our key agencies that we deal with are Department of Education, Department of Health, Queensland Corrective Services, and obviously Department of Housing as well. When we talk about SMEs are defined as the small, anything up to 20 FTE, and medium is anything up to 200 FTE. So, and that's a large majority of our business is geared towards providing support to SMEs in that vein. Next slide. Obviously, we need to comply with the Queensland procurement policy. In terms of the local benefits test, Indigenous procurement, ethical supplier mandate is also one of those elements that we actually do need to comply with, and we're very, very much at the forefront of exceeding those targets that Queensland Government has set for us. We are very clear around supporting the SME market participation while prioritising the use of local suppliers. We put Queenslanders first when securing value for money. And that is very strong in our local supplier mandate and how we actually structure our tenders around that. And very much around supporting Queenslanders and small businesses. One of the initiatives that we first started during COVID was actually introducing accelerated payments, so reducing the payment terms so that, businesses could get their cash flow quicker. And that's been a much lauded success for supporting SMEs in particular during the COVID pandemic. advancement of social, economic and environmental objectives, obviously of course with the local area agreements, but it's also about the ethical supply mandate and actually making sure that the businesses that we engage with do have the responsibilities in place around wages and entitlement. So it's a very clear mandate for us to work with SMEs on that. The next slide, thank you. Again, we're very much supplying local suppliers greater access to opportunities. And as I said, we are statewide. When we talk about the local licensed suppliers, it's within the 125 kilometre diameter. And in particular, when we look at South East Queensland, particularly in the Beenleigh-Logan area, it's pretty much essence from the border right up to South Brisbane. So when it comes to contract and tendering opportunities for that, when there's a local supplier requirement on that, you know, businesses that are locally that are located or manufacturing, or if it's applying materials and other and systems, you know, it actually puts them at advantage over across someone that is actually based in Caboolture. So it very much does play out in South East Queensland. Obviously, of course, in the remote areas, it's actually, you know, centred around, you know, the regional cities and the remote towns as well. In most cases, QBuild in the remote communities and the smaller sized towns in Western Queensland are the main providers of those services for those towns. We use the open tenders to establish standing offer arrangements, and we have panels and district zones. So when you look at the registration, and particularly for the SMEs up to 250,000, the IRIS tender system, you are asked to nominate the region and the zones that you want to be classified as. So there's more details around that. Happy to take questions after this session, or in the booth down the back we've got an actual fact sheet of how you actually register for QBuild to do that. And particularly with non-price criteria, when it comes to a tender situation, we normally look at, say, up to 40% non-price criteria, so it's not just on price alone. And you know, a contingent of that is actually on the local zone, the local supplier. So very much entrenched in what we do in QBuild is actually centred around local suppliers. Next slide. Tender invitations. As I said, QBuild delivers construction and maintenance works for partner agencies. So the partner agencies will call us in to actually help develop up a tender, a service or a program. We'll source that through various mechanisms, whether it be tender invitations to local contractors, which is a large part of what we do, and particularly now that we're actually building up our trade and apprentice base, we still do need local suppliers and contractors to actually help us with that work. And as you heard the Premier today, there will be a lot of work coming up leading up to the Olympics. Again, stressing that the local benefits test is there to support the local workforce. So local businesses, local suppliers take the priority when it comes to the works that QBuild procures. As I said, we have procurement teams across the state. Their details are there. We've got a fact sheet to hand out if you'd like to have a look at that. We are very much here for Queensland, and we are very much here for SMEs. So thank you very much.